Deb Sende with the Center for Effective Discipline. We're a program of the National Child Protection Training Center. The Center for Effective Discipline works on a number of issues. One is that we work on eliminating corporal punishment in public schools. The other is we work to help parents find effective strategies for disciplining their children. Our website is www.stophitting.org. You can email us at info@stophitting.org. Today what we're going to do is talk about corporal punishment in schools. Is it still happening? It's a question that a lot of people have. Sometimes you come from a state where it hasn't happened for quite a while, and people are somewhat surprised. We do still have corporal punishment happening in schools, and we're going to talk about that and talk about what problems that creates and some alternatives. Hamgonote, who was an educator, had a quote: "When a child hits a child, it's called aggression. When a child hits an adult, it's called hostility. When an adult hits an adult, it's called assault. When an adult hits a child, we call it discipline." If you look at the words aggression, hostility, assault, we think of something negative. We think of something as a problem. Hostility, aggression, assault. But when we think of discipline, that really is a positive term. Discipline means teaching. So why is it different? When that child hits a child, it's negative, it's aggression. But when that adult hits the child, it's positive. Maybe we need to rethink. What is corporal punishment? Oftentimes when we think of corporal punishment, we think hitting, spanking, beating. But corporal punishment is anything that is inflicted in order to change behavior and to cause pain or suffering. So it's not only hitting, but it may be pinching, it may be excessive physical exercise, it may be standing for long periods of time, it may be kneeling on something that is uncomfortable, such as a carpet that has a hard texture to it. In old homes, sometimes you'll see heating grates where the heat comes up from the floor, kneeling on that. We've also heard about times that people have children kneel on rice. Very uncomfortable. That's what we're talking when we're talking about corporal punishment. Not just hitting, but any intentional infliction that causes suffering and hurt. Is corporal punishment different than physical restraint? Yes. Corporal punishment is something that is done in order to stop behavior, to change behavior, and to cause pain. Physical restraint is actually something very different. It may take sometimes the same techniques. We may be grabbing, we may be holding, but the intent there is to stop the child, to stop the person from harming themselves, harming someone else, or harming the environment. So they're two very different things. So when we're saying in schools, we don't want to see the corporal punishment, but we also understand that there are times that a child may need to be restrained in order for that child's own protection, for the adult's protection, or for the protection of other children. 2005, 2006, a little bit old, and we'll talk about why we don't have that more recent data, but in 2005, 2006, we had over 223,000 school children who were victims of corporal punishment. Now that's the number of children, 223,000 children. Many of those students were paddled repeatedly. So it's not a one-for-one correspondence. We are not telling you 223,000 incidents. What we're saying, 223,000 students, but we may be talking 290,000 episodes or even more. What we hear from students, what we hear from parents, is that this is a behavior that occurs over and over again. So it's not that the behavior, that the corporal punishment's effective. Because what we're hearing is it's not working if a child has to be paddled again. 2004, 2005, we had over 272,000 students were victims of corporal punishment. Good news is that has shown us about an 18% decrease. We have had a steady decrease since the 1980s. So we are seeing that school districts are doing away with corporal punishment. They're finding effective strategies for dealing with discipline and not needing to use corporal punishment. This information comes from the U.S. Department of the Office for Civil Rights. It takes a while for that information to get conveyed from the states, or from the school districts to the states, to the federal office, and for them to compile. So that's why we're talking about data that is 2005, 2006. This fall, we will be receiving new data. Where are the states where corporal punishment happens? We have 20 states in the U.S. that still currently allow corporal punishment in schools. The red states are the states where it is allowed. You can see huge concentration in the south, southwest, southeast, a little bit up into the mid-north. But these are the 20 states that allow corporal punishment. There are only 2 states out of the 30 states that have banned corporal punishment in the schools that actually ban it in private schools also. That's New Jersey and Iowa. The other 28 states that have banned it is in public schools. Private schools have their own system and their own means. In the U.S. Catholic schools, we did a survey a number of years ago, and we have found that all but one U.S. Catholic school is not using corporal punishment. What are the 10 worst states where corporal punishment happens? Unfortunately, this is a list that states really don't want to be on. But we find Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Oklahoma, again, some of our southern states. Do children suffer injuries? Yes. We're not verifying this number is very, very difficult because the injury has to come to the attention of the parent, then to a medical professional, and the information has to go from there. So, but what we hear is about 20,000 students in 2005, 2006 who were recipients of corporal punishment in schools needed medical attention. Medical attention was anywhere from bruising, lacerations, to hematomas, whiplash, back damage, hemorrhages, spontaneous abortion, and medical complications. So you can see a wide range of the medical injuries that occur when a child is a victim of corporal punishment. These are some pictures from Ohio. Up until a few years ago, corporal punishment was allowable in Ohio. And these are pictures of what we would consider the more minor injuries. Now, it's easy for us to say a more minor injury because we're not suffering the pain that these students had suffered. But this is bruising. Who's paddled in schools? Research tells us that African Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be a victim of corporal punishment in schools than white students. African Americans are 6.5 times more likely to be a victim than Hispanic students. Boys are 3.4 more likely than girls to receive corporal punishment. Students with disabilities are subjected at a much higher rate, twice the rate of the general school population. When you think about this and you look at a number of things that we talk about in terms of school success, dropout rates, what does this tell us? When we see African Americans at a higher rate, we see boys at a higher rate, we see children with special needs at a higher rate. What does it tell us about how we're educating and how we're responding to problems within our school? In the U.S., corporal punishment was once lawful for spouses. Domestic violence. We had corporal punishment with slaves. We had corporal punishment in our military. People in institution, prisoners, were flogged. That has changed. Laws have been passed. We know about spousal abuse, intimate partner violence. We know about what happens in our prisons. We have passed laws to protect adults in our society. But children are most vulnerable, at our teaching times, have not been protected from this. Settings that prohibit corporal punishment, as I said, prisons and jails, the military, hospitals and health facilities, Head Start programs. So we know with our younger children, we don't want to be using this. Colleges and universities. I'm sure everyone sees occasionally in the news about a fraternity or a hazing incidents that happened. When that happens, there's a discipline procedure for that institution, that fraternity, and they may be banned from campus because we don't permit that in our college and university environments. Congress has banned physical punishment in facilities for juveniles who are convicted of federal crimes. In 2005, a public opinion poll was given. Only 23% of Americans believe that teachers should be permitted to spank or use corporal punishment with students. That means 77% of Americans disapprove of the practice. Worldwide, over 100 countries have banned corporal punishment in schools. If you take a look at our list on our website at www.stophitting.org, you will be surprised at the countries. We think as the United States, we're very educated, we're industrialized, we really are the leaders. And it's amazing to look at how we treat our children in the schools in comparison to these other countries. In 1989, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child was actually started by world leaders who wanted to know what are the basic rights of every child. World leaders wanted to make sure that our children were protected, that our children were safe. Number of rights that children have: adequate food and shelter, education, health care, cultural activities. Sounds right? Sounds what we want for our children. The right to protection from violence, from neglect, exploitation, cruelty. The right to participate in decision making, because how do you learn to make decisions if you're not involved in that process? So it's very critical that we involve children in that process. Having a say in matters that affect them. Having access to information. Freely associating with other people, the social aspect that is so necessary for us as humans. With this convention, the rights of the children, there are 2 countries that have not endorsed this, have not signed on, have not ratified. Those 2 countries, Somalia, and the other is the United States. Discipline. As we said earlier, discipline is teaching. Discipline needs to be taught. But discipline belongs in the head. It's where we teach. It's where we think. Understanding cause and effect. It doesn't belong on the behind. Question that comes up often is, okay, we're not going to use corporal punishment. Is it free-for-all? Absolutely not. As we said, there are 30 states in the U.S. that have banned corporal punishment in schools. And those 30 states, they have children that are coming out of schools, high school students that are graduating, going on to further education, to lead very, very productive lives. And they have had good discipline through their school career. In the 20 states that allow corporal punishment, we find within those states there are a number of school districts that are not using the practice, even though it might be on their books, they're not using it, or they have banned it. And again, they're very successful with their students. So what are they doing? Okay, number of things. Behavioral interventions for children. Always need to make sure that they promote the right of the children to have dignity and to have a safe and productive learning environment. So when one student's behavior interferes with someone else's right to education, we need to intervene. So discipline needs to occur. There are safe, effective, evidence-based strategies that are available for children who display challenging behaviors in schools. First thing is prevention. The best way to do it is prevention. Okay? So we deal with school problems, first of all, by preventing them as much as possible. Good discipline not only corrects the misbehavior, but it teaches appropriate behavior, appropriate coping skills. Prevention includes clear behavioral expectations. What's expected? What are we supposed to do and why? We usually respond much better to expectations if we have some information. If I understand that if I do this, certain things happen, well, gosh, it makes more sense than just don't do it. So having clear behavioral expectations, clear guidelines, and an explanation for that. Focus on student success. We all want the positives. Make sure that you have realistic opportunities for all students. Different students have different challenges. All students have challenges. They also have strengths. So make sure that as we're working with students, all students have a chance for success often. Several times per day, a student needs to feel successful. Seek input from students on the rules, but also the consequences for those rules. Have the buy-in from the students. Systems approach. Prevention, intervention, and resolution. Have levels of incremental consequences. A first offense, a second offense, and this is it. Enforce rules with consistency, fairness, and calmness. Consistency is a key. If there is a consequence, the consequence needs to be applied, and it needs to be applied consistently. The Department of Education has a program, PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support. As you see on the website, we have the www.pbis.org. Gives you a lot of information, programs for parents, for the schools. Really gives you a lot of information, and this is a very successful research-based program. It gives schools assistance in identifying, adapting, and sustaining effective school-wide disciplinary practices. PBIS has decreased office discipline referrals, has increased instructional time for teachers and students, decreased administrator time spent on discipline issues. It's been an efficient and effective use of scarce resources, which all school districts are facing right now. Increased perception for students, for teachers, for administrators, and for parents of school safety. And it's sustained through a team approach. Second way is social skills instruction. Teaching students how to make good choices. It teaches them the reasons for those social skills and how behaving appropriately, behaving in a certain way, will get positive results. Skills are modeled, skills are practiced. There's reinforcement, feedback are provided to the students. Self-monitoring skills are taught. Character education teaches students to think about their actions. How do their actions affect others? How do they manage their anger, their frustration, their stress? And how do you make appropriate choices? Student recognition programs. Values are taught, and then they're recognized. Some of those values may be caring for others, respect, responsibility, and then those children are publicly acknowledged for their success. When you have student recognition programs, it is important to make sure at some point in time all students are recognized. So again, find the strengths of each of your students and make sure that we recognize their strengths. Make sure that the positives far outweigh the redirections and the negatives. Peer mediation. Students are given specific instruction in active listening, restating problem situations, anger management, identifying feelings, brainstorming, and developing solutions to problems. Peer mediators are trained to help others solve problems before they escalate into conflict. Another program that is widely used that has a research base is called the Second Step Violence Prevention Program. This integrates academics with social and emotional learning. Students from preschool through grade 8 learn and practice social skills. They learn about empathy, emotion management, problem solving, and cooperation. Information for the Second Step Violence Prevention Program can be found on www.cfchildren.org. So if you live in one of the 20 states that still allow corporal punishment, you happen to live in a school district that allows, and you want to see a change. You want to see a change for your child, for your child's friends, for your community. How do you do that? First step is build your case. Arm yourself with the information. What is happening within your school district and why? Have that information about other school districts within your state that are very successful in teaching students and students being very productive, but they're not using corporal punishment. Why is your school district different from that school district? Look at the states where corporal punishment is not being used and has not been used for a number of years. Build your case. Find your information. Build your coalitions and partnerships. Find out who in your community supports what you do. We'll show you a list of national organizations that also support banning corporal punishment in schools. Call. Find other parents. Go to the national organizations within your state, the chapter there, and find out who there can help you. Prepare for opposition. It will happen. Sometimes old habits die hard. For oftentimes people will say, well, it was good enough for me, and I turned out okay. It's good enough for my student. It's good enough for my child. Is it good enough for your grandchild? That's a question you have to think. So you will meet with opposition. People misinterpret the term punishment and discipline. They interchange them. They're very different. We need to discipline students. We need to do away with the corporal punishment. Develop leadership. Find the people in your community who care, who support ending corporal punishment. Develop that leadership. Plan educational and grassroots activities. Oftentimes the best person to talk is a parent who did not give permission for their child to have corporal punishment. That parent, talking with the media, talking with other parents, comes from a personal perspective. This is part of a list. This is only part of the list of national organizations. Organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics opposes corporal punishment in schools. Association of Junior Leagues, Council for Exceptional Children. National Association of School Psychologists, National Association of Secondary School Principals. Very often the person who has to administer the corporal punishment, their national organization is against this practice. Looking at a model piece of legislation, New Jersey, one of our first states to ban corporal punishment in schools, just gives you an example. Every state would rate their legislation a little bit differently, but this is just an example of the legislation to ban corporal punishment in schools. What are the 10 things that we know about why corporal punishment should be ended? First, we find that it's usually poor children, minority children, children with disabilities, boys hit more frequently. Probably our population that needs the most nurturance, the most support, the most assistance in being successful educationally are the children that we're punishing more often. Corporal punishment has been abolished in more than 100 nations across the world. Again, where are we as the United States? The common perception is that violence is part of our society. And again, as other countries look at our educational system and realize the violence is part of our education, what does that tell people around the world about who we are as Americans? Corporal punishment teaches children that violence is a way to solve problems. How many times are we children on the playground, children in fights? That's a problem. We talk about the aggression that's happening in school. But we have aggression happening from the administrator to the student, from the teacher to the student. So how does that translate for students? School violence has not increased since pedaling has declined. Violent crime in schools has declined dramatically since 1994. We often hear, when we do hear about the school violence, it makes the media. So we get caught with that, and we believe it's a major problem. But when we really looked at the numbers, we really look at the statistics, we have seen that it has actually decreased. And the states where we have school violence oftentimes are the states where corporal punishment is occurring. Corporal punishment of students is related to a decreased internalization of moral rules, increased aggression, more antisocial behavior, increased criminal activity, decreased mental health outcomes, increased adult abusive relationships, and increased risk of being victimized in an adult abusive relationship. So as we look at all of those things that it's associated with, those all tend to be fairly negative. When we understand that corporal punishment is associated with that or linked to that, it tells us it may be time to change our strategies. Academic achievement is a risk factor. If children are afraid of being hit at school, they're fearful of what will happen when they misbehave, it may affect academic achievement. Corporal punishment reinforces physical aggression as an acceptable and effective way to handle problems. Not a life skill that we want our students to learn. Significantly more school shooting deaths were found in states that still allow corporal punishment. School corporal punishment is more widely used in states in the South. In the Southwest, tends to be more in rural districts. It tends to be banned more in areas or not used in areas, even in states that do allow corporal punishment, in the urban and suburban areas. Overwhelming evidence that harsh interventions are damaging to children, both emotionally and physically. The effects of this trauma are even compounded when we have a child who has learning difficulties. When children respond to the problem areas with more violence, children are further traumatized. Stand up for children. The day will come when people will look back and not believe that students receive corporal punishment. That an educator, the person who has taken the duty to teach our children, would intentionally inflict harm on a child. With your help, we can make that day happen sooner than later. Thank you very much.